there is a anti CBDC bill that has been passed in Congress, and a lot of people still don't know what CBDCs are. So let me kind of explain in
Please
a
do.
very simple way. But first, I want to read the article from the Hill that actually talks about this. So it says the House passed a bill Thursday barring the Federal Reserve from issuing a central bank digital currency unless it has explicit authorization from Congress. The act passed the chamber 216 to 192. So many Democrats voted against this, which is absolutely despicable. It's largely symbolic as the Fed has not put forward officially plans to issue a CBDC. So even Trump has voiced concerns about potential government misuse of a CBDC. It's a digital version of a currency issued by a central bank. So some of the things that people say, and I'll go ahead and expand on this, is that a digital dollar could give federal government the ability to surveil Americans' transactions and choke out politically unpopular opinion. And our most astute Jedi, who is, I think, as old as a Jedi now, Maxine Waters from California, who is a ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee, argued that banning CBDCs directly threatens the primacy of the US dollar and says there is nothing inherent about a CBDC that would comprise or that would compromise privacy. That is a design feature that is within our control, she added. The bill is instead an attempt to stifle US innovation and competitiveness abroad and to undermine the federal agency that is most critical to fighting inflation. So,
What?
most critical to fighting inflation.
Well,
Let me explain to people who don't know what a CBDC is. Right now, when the Fed creates money, it gets distributed to banks, right? And once it goes to those banks, then those banks lend money, and then it ends up in your hands, right?
Right.
When the Fed creates a dollar and then gives it to the bank, they lose control over what happens with that dollar. When it goes to your hands, you transact all year round, you do business, you pay people, you do things, and at the end of the year, you're supposed to tell the government what you did with all that money that they printed. That's called taxes. Well, there's a big link there's a big loss of knowing what happens to a dollar after it's created and then distributed to the banks. The CBDC would allow the government to at any point in time be able to track any other digital currency that they have created because it would go directly to your digital wallet in your phone. And guess what? There will be separate monies, separate CBDCs for different things. Some will only be used to buy certain kinds of foods. Others will only be used to buy certain kinds of things. And guess what? If you Max bought too much meat this month, guess who's going to know that? The government. And if you're only allowed to impact the climate change by releasing a certain amount of CO2 or buying enough carbon credits, and you've maxed out your carbon credits, well, guess what? Your money does not work for the rest of the month to buy meat, and that is one of the most disastrous things happening in China with the digital yuan. It's happening. It's happening in China to an extent that people don't have any freedom. They can't buy gas. They can't buy plane tickets, train tickets, and that is what this is all about. And I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, if you don't mind if I interject, Maxine Waters said that this is a federal agency. I'd like to correct her on that. She's a member of Congress. She should know very well that when the Federal Reserve Act was, passed into law, it never established the Federal Reserve as a federal agency. It's a private organization that makes, transactions lends to the government. In fact, they put money in the U.S. Treasury. That's how it works. The U.S. Treasury is part of the government. The Federal Reserve is not. I want to make that distinction. And what people do not understand is that what people don't understand is that it's private. It's private. They make monetary policy without authorization from Congress. And there's something in the U.S. Constitution that says that Congress has the sole responsibility of furnishing coins, making currency, etc. That is literally written within one of the articles. I can't cite that off the top of my head, but there is, meaning that Congress should have that power. And because they don't have that power, the administration, the administrative state, the bureaucracy can say, go ahead and look into CBDC. And that's what they did. Biden signed an executive order back in 2022 saying, I want you to research CBDCs and look into how this can be implemented. So what this bill did specifically was it banned the Federal Reserve from directly giving CBDCs to people, meaning like setting up individual accounts within those banks, the Federal Reserve banks, because there are 12 different banks. And it also banned them from indirectly giving it to people through, whatever bank you're with, like Chase, Wells Fargo, etc. I read the bill myself, so I understand the provisions and what exactly it's doing. They don't want the federal business really, they don't want the Fed really doing business, at least digitally, with the citizens at all. And like you said, they can just go ahead and track purchases. They can put quotas on stuff, and then if you're passing the quota, you can get in big trouble. That's the issue, is tracking and control.
Yeah, I got to be honest, a lot of this goes very much over my head. It's not my expertise or my wheelhouse, but from everything that I can hear, I think that everything that I was hearing reminds me exactly of what the Ryan Mack show said that we just pulled that comment up on the screen. Is I've seen that people are scanning their faces at stores to pay. I saw that in a video that I think I referenced even on Monday on our show in Dubai. I saw that happening in Dubai, and I know that there's some people, and I know, Fabian, this is a conversation we still have to have about the advancement of tech and everything like that. And one of my biggest qualms with the advancement of tech is that I firmly believe the government will always utilize it and co-opt it for purposes of surveillance and then ultimately control. And that's really where I have a problem with all of this stuff, is it seems to be a lot of things that the average person, even me, who I like to think that sometimes I'm a little smart and in tune with what's going on with the government. I think they try to use all these like really, really complicated things, so it goes right over our heads, and they'll just say ultimately, oh, it's just for your convenience, and it's so that we can help you. And so and as we all know, Ronald Reagan said the scariest words anyone can say is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So that's where I think it comes from. Is it's complicated, it's purposefully complicated. That's how the government works, so that they can control us.
There's something you said that's incredibly true. They tried to insert the easeability into whatever they're doing to say, look at how easy it's going to be. Just for instance, the Australia digital ID video that we just released. One of my friends from Australia commented on my post and said, oh my gosh, I was literally signing up for this, and then I saw your video. Kev's have some technical difficulties, so he'll be right back. But she was saying, I just saw your video as I was signing up for the digital ID. And what they told me is that it's going to make things a lot easier. And it is, to a certain extent, but at what cost? At the cost of giving away all of your privacy to someone who can dictate what you do, when you do it, and how you do it.
I heard about this. I was actually told about that. And my prediction is, everybody knows, I mean, well, some people know about FedNow. It's a really interesting program where, they're testing out the CBDC. My guess is that the administrative state is going to try some sort of pilot program, because they don't necessarily need congressional authorization for something like that. They could be like, okay, let's come out with a little cryptocurrency. Let's have 1,000 people to test it out with. And then they can give us ratings at the end of it, and then they can give reviews and whatnot. And then we can just test, like, basically they'll use a very small sample of the population, sort of just like as lab rats, and then they'll put it out, they'll disperse it to everybody else. I think that's what the agenda is. Start small, then get big. And I think that's what they're
as you say that, let me actually pull up this, because you're absolutely right, and it's already happening. So the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, which is basically, they manage all the central banks all over the world to a certain extent, they actually created a central bank digital currency virtual handbook, because what they want is, they want all of the countries to be in sync and to make it the exact same way. So they are giving structured advice on how to create a CBDC. They have actually already created a CBDC, and it is now considered legal tender. I don't know how, in what world you have the power to just automatically create something and ensure that it's legal tender, but they have done it. So this test case is IMF making these guidelines, sending them out to all the central banks around the world, and say, we want you to make it like this, because the IMF wants to have overarching control over all the CBDCs traded all over the world.
Exactly.
And if you think that's not a point of centralization, it doesn't get any more centralized than that. Non-sovereign people who aren't, or sorry, non-citizens who are sovereign over your country's monetary policy and the literal printing and issuance of digital currency.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. I mean, here's the thing. This right here just shows proof that they're going to transition to a digital dollar, right? I don't look at it as everybody's saying some collapse is going to happen. I look at it less of like as a collapse and more as a transition. It's going to be a transition to a digital dollar and eventually to a world currency. If the IMF is managing all these countries and dispersing one currency, they want something universal that everybody across the world can use. I think that's what we're looking at here.
Well, and here's the thing is, people are already saying, as Maxine Waters said, the astute Jedi, the dollar will lose its primacy. And what she means by that is, China already has a digital yuan, and what they have been doing is, they have been utilizing that for soft power. So right now, if the US wants to give money to a country for aid, it has to go through a number of committees and then get voted on. And then it finally gets sent. And that's a long process. And it's a long process for a reason. So there's actual transparency and eyeballs. With the digital yuan, what China has been doing is, they have been going to countries, specifically in Africa and South America, and saying, listen, you have a lot of crime. We have the cameras that we use in our country that have biometric data and a software behind it. We'd like to help you get your country in order. And guess what? Here's a loan. And all they have to do is press a button and it automatically gets sent to their wallet. This is Chinese money, Chinese digital yuan. Now these countries are indebted to China. They're buying their products from China. They're installing the software to China. And what we know, if there's one thing we know about China, is they like to have their bugs that spies on everything that they sell. This is why Huawei phones, they had a ban. I don't know if they still banned from being sold in the US because they found stuff like this. So they are using that, these high interest loans from CBDCs that they just, digital yuan that they just created out of thin air, give it to these countries. And now these countries are indebted to China. And that's how you exert power and influence around the world, with just creating a CBDC.
She's right. Yeah, she's right, and she's right, and she's wrong. The dollar has been losing its primacy essentially since we stopped backing it with an asset called gold. It's no longer backed by gold. Hasn't been for years. Hasn't been for decades. The dollar's been losing its primacy for a long time. So to act in that sense dramatic, where it's like, oh, if we just don't make this shift to virtual, it's going to be so much different. That just shows you the bad representative that she is. She's not representing her people. In fact, I'll tell you this: Representative Tom Emmer, he was the man that introduced this bill. He said that the Fed admitted in some form of documentation that their primary focus right now was to implement CBDC, even though the Fed chair Jeremy Powell was trying to tell a completely different story. So we know this is happening. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. And I got to be honest, this is not, like I said earlier, it's not my wheelhouse, but it's always so crazy to me. But even though it's not my wheelhouse, even though I'll admit I'm not as educated on this specific issue as you, Fabian, and you, Max. What I will say is that that's how a lot of Americans are. And the crazy thing that I feel like even a lot of Americans don't understand is that the difference between normalcy and absolute chaos is a 1 to a 0. And that's exactly, and what I mean by that is when we look at the value of our currency, our currency, as well as its comparative value to every other currency, a 1 to a 0. It used to be, like you said, it used to have a physical backing, the physical backing of gold. And now that we deal so much in the digital world, and we're even moving towards crypto, which is a debate in and of itself among conservative circles, currency now isn't even the cash you hold. It's shit that exists in the ether, like that you can't actually even see. And while to many, it's again that idea of convenience. It's that idea that that there's a lot of good things that can come out of having it exist through the cloud, through your phone, through debit cards, credit cards. Not having that physical backing means that the difference between normalcy and a destruction of the world is somebody accidentally typing in a 0. Or purposely.
Yeah, so there's a that's a whole rabbit hole to go down, and I would love to go down it sometime, because the entire way that we just print currency, it's all a Ponzi scheme. It's the largest Ponzi scheme ever created in the history of humanity, and it can't ever stop because of interest. And for anyone watching who is like, can I understand this in a very simple way? There actually is a way that I can explain it to you. You can understand it. If I print $1 and I loan you that dollar with 5% interest, how much do you owe me? $1.05. But where does that 5 cents come from if I only printed $1? That is a Ponzi scheme. There is not enough money to ever pay back what is owed plus interest, because the interest does not exist in the present. It exists as an account, as a ledger.
Right. And then they say we have to print more money to account for that interest. And so that's what keeps it going. And so then Congress approves these spending bills and all these things that really forces that to happen. Really,
it is absolutely impossible. It is impossible to pay back all the money everybody owes at any point in time because of the interest. And that is a Ponzi scheme. And that's why they keep trying to say, well, we need to collect more taxes. Well, everything is to, and then here's the thing with the financial systems, they add layers of complexity to make you think it's this grand system, but all they're really doing is they're trying to patch up the inadequacies of the system by adding more financial instruments and derivatives and all these fancy things. Like Kevin, you were saying, a lot of people don't understand, and they make it specifically hard to understand for that reason. It's just smart people who understand that the system is inherently a Ponzi scheme, try to add layers of complexity to delay the Ponzi scheme from exploding. And that's what we've been seeing all along.
Right. And let me, oh, sorry, go ahead. I think you looked.
No, I was done.
I just wanted to say this is your perfect excuse, everybody. If you're worried about getting that car because you're worried about going into debt, if you're worried about going to law school because you're going to go into a lot of debt, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't actually exist.
It doesn't exist. Thank you, Kevin. That's what I tell everybody who is stressed out over their credit cards. I'm like, your stress is real. The shortening of your life from stress is real. The money doesn't exist. The credit card companies are not going to lose because they just increased that doesn't exist. They just gave you something and that doesn't exist, and you have to pay it back. If you don't, guess what? They write it off on their taxes at the end of the year, and they just pay less taxes on money they did make. Yeah. No one loses. You are the ultimate loser.
That brand new 2024 mid-engine Corvette, that's real. The money that you owe on it, Nowhere to be found, man.
Right. That's exactly right. That's what people don't understand is standard deductions, and that's something that that debt gives you that advantage. Debt gives you that advantage of having a standard deduction, and that's why people should read the tax codes. The IRS the booklet is very big. I can't say that it's not. But you made a very good point. You said, look, we're never going to pay off this debt. Never. I don't care who you elect. I don't care who you elect. I don't care even if you put in Donald Trump. We're not going to pay off the debt because of the system that we're under. And right now, we have members of Congress, actually, I don't know if you saw, supporting a bill called, it's basically about ending the Fed from Thomas Massey. He basically has 22 Republican co-sponsors. And I got to say this, if your representative isn't co-sponsoring that right now, you should probably fire your representative because they're not representing you. They're representing the bureaucracy. They're representing the intelligence agencies. They're representing the deep state. I like to call them the deep state. That's who they're representing. They're not representing your district.
Yeah, there are literally tens of thousands of laws and bills. And I really like what Elon Musk said quite a while ago. He said, if you want to make a good country, for every law that you pass, sunset 2 laws. I mean, it's really simple. You want to put a new law forward, find 2 that you're going to sunset, that you're going to eradicate, that are no longer laws. That's how you create a system where you have less bureaucracy. I think ending the Fed would be one of the most important things that we've done as a country since I believe its inception in 1913, which was basically a bunch of rich bankers like Chase and Rockefeller and people like that. They just got together and said, hey guys, how can we control the whole damn thing?
Yeah, and
well, let's make a boys club.
Absolutely. And
Wait,
there's
sorry, I have to announce something that's happened.
That's
okay,
what
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say.
Okay,
there's one person this whole show I've just been wondering, what does he think? What does he think? What does he think? Especially as it comes to money. Our favorite Jew, David.
Hey, your favorite Jew's here.
You
What's going on? Way to bring me in for the money segment, right? And Max, it's great to meet you, man.
Money.
Hey, I appreciate that. Maybe you can get me in at Goldman Sachs. Just kidding.
I was just thinking, all my anti-Semitic jokes, I'm gonna just be like, don't worry, I have a Jew friend.
Don't worry, I have a Jew friend. There you go.
He runs Hollywood. He runs the banks. Like he does it all.
I got it all.
Good to meet you, man.
Good to meet you as well, Max. Been listening to this awesome segment. I literally just got home, so sorry that I'm a little fashionably late, but awesome segment so far. And hell yeah, that the bill or the House passed this anti CBDC bill. I have to always say it slow. I rushed through it and it ends up sounding like that alphabet soup mix that they got going on.
Yeah, how do you say it, Kev?
Legibitica.
There you go. But no, this is awesome to see, honestly, because I feel like the whole point of cryptocurrency, or at least the decentralization aspect of it, the blockchain aspect of it, is to remove that third party from it. And that third party is always the federal government, right? So it's nice to see the federal government, because the House is part of the federal government, take the initial step that I would say to safeguard the whole idea of blockchain technology. Because again, the reason it was invented in the first place is to keep the federal government out of it. Well, damn, of course they said, I want a share of all of this enormous market cap, honestly.
The mob wants to cut.
The mob wants to cut, exactly. So it's great to see that. And I'm pretty sure this passed. Does anybody know the numbers? Like what was it,
yeah,
230?
basically it was just straight down lines. It was, I think there was like 4 Republicans that voted present, and I can pull it up.
Yeah.
It was 216 to 192, so I would assume the majority that opposed are probably Democrats because Republicans have the slim majority.
It's interesting. Why would Democrats, and this is kind of an open
You wonder why, huh?
Yeah, I wonder why. Does anybody know?
Yeah, because they all bang hookers and they're all blackmailed.
It's kind of
Okay,
it's kind of a forecast.
Don't give Republicans that much credit. I guarantee
No, I
you. A
don't.
lot of
No,
them,
Republicans too.
they bang hookers too.
Oh, absolutely. They're both
That's
dogs
maybe
on
one.
both sides.
That's maybe one good thing they've done out of this entire, out of the entire
Bang
2 years
hookers?
they've had almost now. But I will say this is kind of a forecast. I think this kind of shows you that once this gets to the Senate, it's probably not going to pass. It's going to stall on Chuck Schumer's desk. He's going to make sure it doesn't really get onto the floor or anything, I think.
Of course.
Absolutely.
That's what I was. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. 3 Democrats voted 4 voted not present.
I wonder what Bernie
No,
did.
18.
I wonder how
Bernie's
Bernie
in the
voted.
Senate. It's in the Senate.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wonder how he's going to vote, because he's all about giving out free stuff.
Well, then
He's
that
all
would be
about
AOC. Then you should be asking about AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, we all know
Actually,
how they vote.
it's funny that you say free, because honestly, when they start handing out central bank digital currency, I think that's how they're going to get people into it. Like they're going to say, hey, if you get into it, you get like X amount in initial deposit to your account. Like so
They're going to do that. They're also going to make
purchases.
yes, they're also going to make expiration dates on certain money. So if you want to stimulate the economy, right? Say things are going a little slow. Hey,
Right,
guess
yeah.
what? Everyone, free money, but you have to use it in the next 30 days, or else it goes away. I mean, think about that. You're adding gamification to an economy and saying, hey, everyone, go buy stuff you don't need. Go buy junk or do, I don't know, whatever it is. This money's only good for the bugs that you can buy now because of Klaus Schwab brand bugs. And if you don't, no organic stuff, it's not going to work for organic stuff.
Well, and that's
Mhm.
exactly the type of thinking that was enabled. And look, I know that we just spent a lot of time in the first segment talking about Donald Trump, how we like him. He's great, going to be a great president, blah, blah, blah. But one of my biggest criticisms of the man is the fact that he signed the bill that authorized the COVID relief checks. And
CARES Act. The CARES
yeah,
Act.
and to have that's opened the door to the idea of the government directly handing out money. And so when we talk about like, oh man, like they're going to offer these cash incentives to join this kind of stuff. Look, let's be honest with who kind of allowed that and who signed the dotted line to say that has some level of precedent in the law of the land. That was Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But I
well-
feel like, go ahead, Max. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
go ahead. No, you go. You haven't talked much.
No, I've talked enough for being here for as long as I've been here. But I was just gonna say is that I feel like there is a difference, though. Essentially, I agree with you that was
You're
a
right,
pretty
you're
bad
right.
precedent, but there was an emergency, right? So, but who knows? They can,
Yeah, but no
create any
no one
crisis.
cares about what the context was. We talked about that earlier too. Is no one cares about the context. I mean, they don't care that it was an emergency.
That is
The bottom line, the shallow bottom line, is that the government handed out free money,
Right.
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
that's now we can do that. That's a thing that now we can do because of what Donald Trump signed.
Well, yeah. And that's a fact. Honestly, if Joe Biden was an ounce smarter than he was, instead of just like citing these random numbers and saying inflation was already at 9% when I got into office, he could say, look, the CARES Act was inflationary policy, and therefore it did partially contribute to the inflation that you're seeing now. If he was smart, he could campaign and say, look, Trump signed the CARES Act, he did, but he's not doing that. And then secondly, notice how like in this bill, it says that Congress can still authorize a CBDC. So, and a plot twist, Congress could just turn around tomorrow and say, we authorize a CBDC now. Well, they could, if they actually get this passed in the law, Biden signs, whatever, Congress can still ram a bill through that makes it so that we're under a CBDC because it says that this would put the approval in the hands of Congress. We already know all the sellouts in Congress. We already know how much of our freedoms they've taken away. They set us up with the Patriot Act. They set us up with all these different things. And then this could be the next thing. We don't know. I mean,
Yeah, as you guys may or may not know, I'm the CMO of BankX, which is a silver-pegged decentralized stablecoin, and that doesn't mean anything to you. Just it's okay. But essentially, it was created to be the complete antithesis to the CBDC. Now, here's what we've been saying for about 3 years now: is the plan is to print endlessly into oblivion, get everyone a quick fix, a little sugar rush, and then say, "Look, America, we have a big problem. If you're American and you want America to continue as the most powerful country in the world, we have to go to a CBDC. We're at over $1 trillion in credit card debt. We're at $1.5 trillion in interest being printed just to pay interest, which I call it the rich man's welfare, because that's how they live, is off the interest. But if there's anyway, I don't want to get into that. The whole point is to give people the option, say, would you like to continue on regular fiat and collapse as a country? Or would you rather move to a CBDC and save America? It's the patriotic thing to do.
Yeah.
It's save America, everybody.
Right. You have a good point. The Federal Reserve is the greatest criminal cartel in existence because it's very out there and very hidden at the same time.
Yep. And that's exactly it. And honestly, I've been thinking about it. Like, how are they going to be able to rush this through? Even if, let's say, Congress blocks it, well, they'll be able to create some sort of crisis. And by creating that crisis, they're going to convince the public that, like you were saying, Fabian, don't you want to save America? Well, this is the only way to do so.
Only way.
Yeah. And when creating that crisis, well, that's when you can use that precedent set earlier by President Trump that the federal government can essentially hand out money to you guys. So at the end of the day, all of this does connect back to what Kev was saying.